Well, it has been fun to be with you guys this week. I've really enjoyed your attentiveness, appreciated some of the questions. In fact, for today's talk, I'm going to try to cut it a little bit shorter and give some time for Q&A. I thought that was great what Nate Wilson did yesterday, and so I want to give you guys a chance. So be thinking of questions. Doesn't have to be about today's talk. Could be about anything. So feel free to kind of prep for that. I also thought it was just very highly amusing in light of yesterday's talk about the differences between men and women when Mrs. Lloyd said, she's going to give you guys an hour and a half to get ready tonight. And the girls are like, yes. And the guys are like, great. That means I'm going to have an hour and 28 minutes to just hang out. So there you go. All right. So let me pray, and then we'll get into Genesis 4 here. Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you for this week. Grateful for these students and their attentiveness. Jesus told us to take care how we hear. Take care how we hear, like to be the kind of hearers where the word gets in there and gets down deep and then bears fruit 30, 60, 100-fold for the rest of our lives. I pray for this last talk that same attentiveness would be here even after a long week and late nights and lots of energy and exhaustion probably at this point. Grant us attentiveness for this last day, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we're going to talk about Cain and Abel a little bit, and this is a big story, and we could spend a lot more time than I'm going to spend on it. One of the things that you should know about just kind of early chapters of Genesis, we normally talk about the fall as Genesis 3, right? That's when Adam and Eve sin. That's when sin enters the world. But actually the way that the book of Genesis presents it is that there's actually kind of a three-stage fall. Like Genesis 3 is actually the beginning, but it's not the end of the mess. It's a three-stage fall. So in Genesis 3, we have the fall in the garden where Adam and Eve disobey God and eat from the tree. And then in Genesis 4, now they've been cast out of the garden and they're in the land of Eden, right? So the garden is in Eden, and then there's Eden, so garden and then Eden, and then there's a fall in Eden, and that's what we're going to talk about today, Cain and Abel. And then that's not the end of it, because after that, then mankind spreads out, starts to build cities, and then you have the increasing violence and evil and wickedness of the world that we see in Genesis 5 and 6 during Noah's time. And so you can see how basically like sin starts in the garden with the serpent tempting and Adam and Eve falling, and then it just kind of spreads and infects and gets into everything until finally God says, enough, and you have the flood, right? Does that make sense? Okay, that pattern actually happens again in the next 6 chapters after Genesis, or the next 3 chapters after Genesis 9. So you get the flood, God wipes out, starts over, and Noah is like a new Adam. He's given the same kind of commission, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. And then what you have immediately is Noah sins, right? He gets drunk. He plants a vineyard, makes some wine, and gets drunk and passes out. So that's, it's similar to Adam, right? So there's fruit of the vine. He's sinning with that. And then his son exposes his nakedness. And there's some confusion about exactly what was going on there. But there's a sin of the son and involving the brothers. And then there's a curse on the brothers on the youngest brother because of what he did. And then after that, it spreads again, and you get Tower of Babel. Okay, which is the big global worldwide sin. Everybody gets together and says, we're going to build a temple to heaven and we're going to make a name for ourselves. And then God. Now, what's interesting is that at that point, God doesn't say, and now I knock down their temple and I wipe them out and I start over yet again. Instead, he says, no, I'm just going to scatter them and I'm going to do a new thing. So there's an interesting way of reading those early chapters, those first 11 chapters of Genesis, in which basically sin lands, spreads out, and God says, I'm going to wipe it out and start over. And everybody's like, Noah's the guy. Is this the guy? He's going to give us rest. He's going to give us relief from the curse. And Noah's the guy. And then Noah is not the guy. He's a righteous man, but he himself sins. He can't be the one. Sin is still a problem. Even you can wipe out all the sinful people and start over with a small family. Sin's still there. Sin's still there. So you don't get rid of the sin problem by wiping everybody out. Instead, there's a new solution, and it's Abraham and Abraham's family on the way to Jesus. So that's just like a quick overview of how the rest of Genesis 1 to 11 fits with what we're doing today. Now let's look at Genesis 4. So I'm just going to make 3 quick observations about the story of Cain and Abel, okay? And then and then we'll draw some implications. Number one, this story accents that Abel is Cain's brother. 7 times in this passage, Abel is referred to as Cain's brother. Verse 2, verse 8, twice. Verse 9, twice. Verse 10, and verse 11. So again and again, when you're reading this passage, it's wanting you to the one thing the biblical author wants you to get is Cain and Abel are brothers. They're brothers, they're brothers, they're brothers. Pay attention to the fact that they're brothers. And so the emphasis of the passage is on sibling rivalry. Sibling rivalry, okay? This is about brotherly rivalry. Number 2. So you know the story. The brothers bring their offerings to God. Cain works the ground. Abel is a keeper of sheep, so farmer and shepherd. And they both bring offerings, and Cain brings grain, and Abel brings a blood sacrifice. And they both bring their offerings to God, but Abel and his offering are accepted, and Cain and his offering are not. So, and notice that when you look in the passage, notice that God doesn't just reject the offering, he rejects the person. Okay? So it's not just, oh yeah, I don't want your offering, I just want you, Cain. No, it's Abel, I accept your offering and you. And then Cain, I reject your offering and I reject you. So it's a rejection not just of the offering, but of the person. Okay? Number 3, here's the key question. Why does God reject one of them and not the other? What's the difference? Like, they both brought it, and it seems like, is God just being arbitrary? Is he just flipping a coin? I'll accept Abel. Is he showing favoritism? And I think the passage suggests 2 reasons why God accepts Abel and rejects Cain. First thing, remember yesterday, or I guess it was 2 days ago, when we were talking about the fact that God killed animals in order to cover the nakedness and shame of Adam and Eve, the animal skins that he covered them with? Okay. That was to demonstrate that sin demands blood. Okay? If there's sin, somebody has to die, and if it's not going to be Adam and Eve immediately, it's going to be an animal in their place, and they're going to be covered with the animal skins. Someone has to die for our sins. Blood must be shed. So when Cain and Abel bring their offerings, I think it's significant that Cain only brings a grain offering. He doesn't, so he's bringing a grain offering, and he's not bringing a blood offering. You say, well, he's not a shepherd. Well, he's got a brother who's a shepherd, like trade, like, hey, Abel, here, I'm going to give you some of my grain. You give me one of your sheep so that when I approach a holy God, I can come covered in blood. Cain doesn't do that. He seems to think, I can just come into God's presence with my grain, and God will be like, that's fine, you don't need blood. Abel knows you need blood. If I'm going to enter into the presence of a holy God, I've got to come covered in blood. So that's one reason I think that God rejects Cain and not Abel. And it may even be about an order thing. It may mean that, so the text says that Cain brought his offering and then Abel also brought his offering. So Cain went first, and it may have been that Cain should have said, Abel, you have to go first. We're going to bring our offerings to God. You need to bring the blood one first. We got to lead with blood, otherwise we're dead. So lead with blood, and then I'll bring my grain. Okay, that would be the proper order. So that's one reason why God may reject Cain and not Abel. The second is the passage says that Cain brought some fruit of the ground. Just some fruit of the ground. While Abel, it says, he brings the firstborn of his flock and the fat portions. And so there may also be an element here of Cain saying, any old thing will do. I just bring some fruit. Whereas Abel says, I have to bring God the best. The firstborn, the fat portions, I'm bringing God the best as a representation of all that God has given me. I'm bringing that. And so God says, that's exactly how you're supposed to do it. You bring me your best. You don't bring me the leftovers. So Abel brings the best. Abel brings blood, and God accepts it. Cain doesn't bring the best, and Cain doesn't bring blood, and God rejects it. Now, the rest of the Bible actually fills out the picture of why Cain's offering is rejected. So that's what we get, I think, in putting the pieces together in Genesis. But what do later biblical authors do? What do they say about the passage? Let me give you a couple examples. Hebrews 11:4. By faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous. God commended him by accepting his gifts. So faith, trust, dependence is the only way that human beings can please God. And so the author of Hebrew goes, well, God accepted Abel's offering, that means Abel offered it in faith. Abel was trusting God, and God honored his faith. So he offered by faith, God accepted the faith. And the fact that he rejects Cain's offering means Cain didn't have faith. And if you want to know, how do you know that? Well, look at Cain's reaction. Okay? As soon as he gets the rejection, he's filled with anger. His face falls. The anger demonstrates his heart was wrong in bringing this offering. He's not like, God, I'm sorry. What did I do wrong? He's like, God, I'm angry at you. How dare you reject my offering? Which just shows you he's not bringing his offering with the right heart. And God tells him, if you do well, if you have a right heart, if you have a heart of faith, your offering would be accepted too. But Cain's heart is wrong. Sin is crouching at his door like a monster ready to devour him. Sin desires to possess Cain, to own him completely. Cain's only hope is to trust in God and crush his sin, to fight it, which means he has to come to God in humble faith, and that's the one thing he won't do. He doesn't do that. Instead, he's filled with envy, he's filled with anger, he's filled with rage at his brother, and so he kills him. And in 1 John 3, chapter 12, this is the other place in the New Testament where we get some reflection on Cain. We're told this: we should not be like Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil and his brother's righteous. So there's a sense here that what 1 John is telling us is Cain chose sides. So you remember 2 days ago we talked about how God's going to start a war between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. So the devil and the godly are going to be in a fight beginning in Genesis 3. Cain choose, and so that gives us the option. Choose sides. Who are you with? Are you with God, seed of the woman, or are you with the devil, seed of the serpent? And Cain chooses sides. He's of the evil one. He was an offspring of the serpent. He was a part of the brood of vipers. And because Abel's heart was right, and because God accepted his offer, and Cain's heart was wrong, and he grew angry and did evil, Cain is then filled with envy and rivalry and malice toward his brother, and because he can't punch God in the face, he kills his brother instead. If you can't get at God, because God's up in heaven, and what are you going to do to him? What do you attack? I think Dr. Merkel said this the other day, or somebody said this the other day. Maybe it was Toby. If you can't assault God, what do? You assault his image. And there's his image right there. Smug guy who just got his offering accepted. I'm taking him out. Now, a lot more we could say about the passage. Talk about how Cain responds when God confronts him. I don't know where my brother is. I don't know. Who? Say his name again. Abel. That sounds familiar. I don't know where my brother is. Am I my brother's keeper? What's this? This is the same kind of blame shifting and hiding that we saw with Adam and Eve. We could talk more about that. Talk about God's mercy. He doesn't kill Cain on the spot, but gives him protection, a chance to repent, to turn from his evil. But what I want to do in the remainder of the talk is actually drill into the roots of rivalry and envy. And I want us to talk about desire. Because in this passage, both Cain and Abel want something. They want God's approval. They want God's acceptance. But Abel's desire is a good and righteous desire. It's rewarded. And Cain's desire is an evil and envious desire, and it's rejected. So we're going to talk about desire. And this is going to be really relevant for you. Probably more relevant for you than just about anybody else, because it's going to be live for you in the way we talk about it. Normally we think desire is a simple thing. There's the subject who desires something, and there's the thing that they want. Like, there's me, and then there's the burrito, right? That's desire. This passage actually shows us that desire is often more complicated than that, because this passage isn't just about Cain wanting something over here and Abel wanting something over there. There's actually something going on between the two brothers as well, because if God rejects Cain, why does he take it out on Abel? And so let's talk about the complexity of desire. God made us to be imitative creatures, okay? We imitate those that we admire. We become like those that we like. You guys have been talking about this, a couple of the talks about friendship, right? You become like those that you like. Not only do we imitate their behaviors, we also imitate their desires. And we do it spontaneously without even thinking. You don't even have to try. You're just wired this way. And the fancy term for this imitating of desire is mimetic desire. Who knows Greek? Anybody in here know Greek? No. Surprising. Okay. Then I'm going to give you a little bit. You can impress your friends, maybe your parents when you go home. The Greek word for imitation is mimesis, M-I-M-E-S-I-S, mimesis, which means imitation. And so mimetic desire is imitative desire. It means wanting something because someone else wants it. Does that make sense? Tracking with that? Wanting something because someone else wants it first. Our desire is initiated by or increased by its reflection in another person's desire. You could think of this also as triangular desire. So instead of just being, I want that, subject and object, there's subject who desires, there's the object that I want, and then there's the third person, the model who makes the object valuable to me. There's the person desiring, the object that's desired, and the model who makes the thing desirable because he desires it too. And so here's the deal. Does that make sense? You guys got the triangle in your head? There's the subject who wants it, there's the thing that he wants, and then there's the person at the top who's the reason why he wants it or she wants it. You guys got the triangle? Okay, now here's the deal. When the object that we both desire can be shared, that's called friendship. Produces friendship. Mimetic desire produces friendship and camaraderie. So because friends love and enjoy the same things, and their joy is increased when they share it. So in fact, C.S. Lewis defines friendship as the spontaneous discovery of you too. Okay? So he describes this moment when you're just hanging out. Maybe this may have happened this week with some of you. You never met somebody, and you're just hanging out talking, and then somebody says, yeah, the other day I was reading this book. Or I went and saw that movie, or I'm a rower. Somebody here's there's some rowers here. I think I was listening to Joe talk about rowing. I'm a rower, and then there's a moment when if you go, you too, I like that, and what immediately happens? Now we're friends because we both like the same thing, right? That's how friendships get started. The discovery that someone else loves what we love increases and strengthens our delight in it, because now we're just going to start talking. We're going to start chattering at each other about, oh, have you seen that? Yeah, I've seen that. And it's going to be really good. And now we're buddies. Okay. And it's not clear. Are we friends because we love the same things? Or do we love the same things because we're friends? Sometimes it's hard to tell which comes first. However, mimetic desire has a darker side, because if only one of us can possess the thing that we want, what will happen? What's that? Covetousness, rivalry. We're going to fight over it. Envy, rivalry, conflict. So I just want you to imagine this, okay? Here's a scenario. I want you to imagine a room full of toys, toy animals, okay? Like a white dog and a black horse and a brown cow, all the little animals out on the floor. And in the middle of the room, there's a small child. We'll call him Abel. And he's in the middle of the room, and he's happily playing with the black horse. All the other toys scattered about. Second child comes in the room. We'll call him Cain. So he comes into the room. There's toys everywhere. Which toy does Cain want? How did you know? You guys know these kids? You met them? Yes. They live in my heart. Right, the black horse. Everybody, it's interesting. I do this kind of talk a lot. Everywhere I go, it doesn't matter how old or how young. I could do this to a 5-year-old, and a 5-year-old would go, I know which toy Cain wants. I know exactly. It's because it's the same toy I want. Where's this Abel kid? Give me the black horse. Right? Everybody knows. Everybody knows which toy Cain wants. Why? Why is he unimpressed by all the other toy animals, including the other black horse, the identical black horse that's sitting on the rug? Because what makes the black horse valuable is the fact that Abel is happily playing with it. It's Abel's desire for that toy that makes that toy desirable to Cain. Follow me? Now, that's not the end of the story, because it's a two-way street. So before Cain came in the room, okay, Abel could have happily put the black horse down and picked up the brown cow and just been contentedly playing with the brown cow instead of the black horse. But now that Cain has come in the room and said, I want that, will Abel say, oh, sure, I'll play with the other one? No. He could have happily put it down. Now he will fight to the death to keep the black horse. He will cling to it like his life depended on it. Why? Because Cain's desire for the black horse has confirmed and reinforced and increased his desire for the black horse. Now Cain has become the model for Abel's desire. You see that? So Abel is the model for Cain is the model for Abel, and now the boys are taking their cues from each other. They're feeding on each other's cravings. The more that he wants it, the more that I want it. The more that I want it, the more that he wants it. And it's just like, you know those ping pong matches, like the professional ones where those guys, you can't even see the ball, and it's just like bang, 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 bang. And that ball is just flying across. That's what's happening to desire in that moment. The desire is just flying across the room and amping up, and all of a sudden, like, the value of that horse has shot through the roof. It's worth now about $55 million. There actually is a really important connection here. Actually, mimetic desire, if you want to think about, if you get into economics, okay? You want to understand economics, you need to understand mimetic desire. About why it is that there's this famous story about tulips in Holland. You guys ever study? You know this story? Where like people started like buying and selling tulips, and like the more that people, and it became like a craze, and everybody's like buying and selling tulips, and like all of a sudden tulips are worth like $55 million, and it's a flower in Holland where they have tons of them. What's going on? And it's because everybody's queuing off of everybody else. And they're saying, well, I know I want to take it because I think if I buy it for $55 million, I think tomorrow I'll sell it for $56 million. And so I'm queuing off of everybody else, and the value of those flowers goes to the roof until, we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. Now, the important thing to stress here is it's not inherently evil. It's like God has built us to love what other people love, to take our cues from others, from models who awaken desires in us by desiring things. It's the foundation of both friendship and rivalry. But here's what I want you to understand. This kind of desire is found in almost all, I'm tempted to say, all of your relationships. It's there, even if you don't recognize it. It has a million faces, and so for the next, 10 o'clock already. I'm going to try to do 15 minutes and give you some time for questions. 15 minutes, we're going to talk about a couple of the faces. Okay. Let me give you some examples, okay? Two friends. So you might think, okay, this is the only thing that like little kids do, right? This is what little kids do about toys. No, it's what best friends do about girls or boys, right? Why do two friends often have a falling out over a love interest, over somebody that they're interested in? Why does that happen, right? It happens in your lives. It happens in the movies. This is like the foundation of like half of the movies that you've ever seen is like literally these two people are best friends, and then all of a sudden, here's somebody of the opposite sex. And you can see it coming from a mile away. Like if they're buddies and all of a sudden, like here comes the girl walking by, you know they're about to fight. Why? Because they're imitating each other's desire. The first one who goes, hey, she's kind of cute. The second one goes, yeah, she is. And then all of a sudden they're looking at each other like, who's it going to be, man? There can be only one. Okay? It's often very subtle because no one wants to publicly acknowledge the competition, because if you acknowledge the competition, that kind of usually puts you in the lower seat. It means you're losing. And so here's a situation that the guys will identify with and the girls will probably not, but I've got one for the girls in a minute that will get back at them. So here's the deal, guys. You ever been walking along with your buddy, walking down the street? Maybe it's your brother. You have a sibling, and you're walking down the street, and all of a sudden, one of you starts to walk just a little bit faster. And so you're walking, and then one of you walks a little bit faster, and so the other one goes, huh, and he starts walking a little bit faster. And now you're walking a little bit faster than the first guy, and the second guy's, and you start walking faster, and then one of you might stop. Hey, are we racing? No, I wasn't racing. What are you doing? I was just walking. And then you start walking, but you're looking at each other. And one of you starts walking a little bit faster, and the other one starts walking a little faster. And pretty soon, you are literally sprinting down the street while insisting that you are not racing. Okay? Why? It's ridiculous. And every guy goes, done it. It's ridiculous. What are you doing? You're cueing off of each other. You think all of a sudden this became a competition. There's a prize. I have to beat him. I have to beat him. Okay, now, in those kind of situations, like if it's a situation where two guys like the same girl, both of them might genuinely like enjoy the girl. She's nice, she's pretty, we're interested in her. But the reason that her value amps up is because of their rivalry, right? Do you really think that Helen of Troy was that beautiful? I don't at all. I think that she was probably a very pretty lady. And then I think the fact that Paris stole her meant the Greeks said, we got to get her back. And it had very little to do with her as a person. Like it wasn't like she's got a great personality and we got to get her back. It was, we have to show those Trojans who's boss. It's the rivalry that made it, but everybody talks about the story, Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships. And it was really the rivalry that was fueling it. And the funny thing is that Helen often gets blamed. You read ancient literature, Helen gets blamed for this, like it's her fault, right? Like, oh, she's this she's this evil woman, this harlot who was like, starting wars. And it's like, why is it her fault that they're chumps who can't stop racing? Okay. You think about all of the books that you've read. Maybe you don't read them. Maybe your friends read them because you don't want to admit it. But the books or the movies that you see where like you resolve into like teams, like there's two guys who are interested in the same girl, and like people resolve into team. Like I never read these books, but I think that this was a thing that with those Twilight books, and everybody's like, I'm on team whatever that guy's name was, and I'm on the other team, and like every movie does this, and like you got to pick teams. Like who do you want to actually win? Because it's all about the competition. Okay. So desire can be amplified by the desires of others, and sometimes the desire for the girl is even initiated and created by the desire for the others. Like she wasn't even interesting at all, literally. So and this again, this may not be your deal, but you listen to music, and they will sing this. So you guys know Michael Jackson, right? You know the song "I Want You Back." Who knows the song "I Want You Back"? Okay, when I had you to myself, I didn't want you around. When I had you to myself, I didn't want you around. Those pretty faces always made you stand out in the crowd. That's the meanest thing that anybody has ever said. Like you're my girlfriend, you were my girlfriend, but all of the pretty faces made you stand out. And it's in a song where he's like, I want you back. And you're like, I don't think this is gonna work, man. Okay, now watch. Listen to the song. Those pretty faces always made you stand out in the crowd, but someone picked you from the bunch, and that was all it took. Now it's much too late for me to take a second look. I want you back. Oh, baby, give me one more chance. Won't you please let me back in your heart? Oh, darling, I was blind to let you go. Let you go, baby. But now, since I've seen you, it is on. I want you back. Oh, I do now. I want you back. Ooh, baby. Yeah. What? It's not done. Trying to live without your love is one long sleepless night. So now the girl that he was like, I had you to myself, didn't want you around. Now he's like, I can't stop thinking about her. Let me show you, girl, that I know wrong from right. Every street you walk on, I leave tear stains on the ground, following the girl I didn't even want around. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing about that song. He quite literally says, the reason that I want you is because someone else picked you from the bunch. It's amazing. The honesty there, okay? And there are dozens of songs like this, right? There's a girl version of this, like it's a more recent song. I don't know, the girl has a very annoying voice, and I don't listen to a ton of music, but I was at the gym one time, and I was at the gym, and it was like every day at like 7:13 a.m., like right in the middle of my squats, like the gym just put that song on, and it was like torture. It was like, I'm gonna get done, it's gonna get me done faster, because I gotta get out of here, okay? But it was the same, the song I think was actually called I Want You Back. And it was the same thing, like, you're taking your new girlfriend and you're doing all the things that I did with you first. And now you're doing them with her. And and I want you back. And it's the exact same thing coming the other direction. It's not a man-woman thing. This is a people thing. Okay. Next example. This kind of desire often stabilizes our insecure desires. So the best way to stabilize a desire you're not sure about is to have it echoed by somebody else's. So you ever had this situation? You go to the movies with your friends, you walk out of the movie, and you're like, man, I really like that. But then your friend's like, no, I didn't really. And you're like, yeah, me neither. Okay? Now here's what happened right there. Your first thing was a fishing expedition. You threw that statement out there, I like that movie, and you did so tentatively. You were like, you might have actually liked it, but you're not sure if it was okay to like it or if the movie was really lame. And so you say, I kind of like that. And if they came back and said, oh, me too, I love that part, then you would have been like, yeah, and then you would have been on, okay? But instead, if you say, I kind of like that, and they're like, no, it was dumb, and you're like, yeah, I kind of thought it was dumb too, you're right. Why? Because your desires are insecure and you're looking for them to be stabilized by another person. Sometimes we praise what we enjoy because we're fishing. We want to know that we're liking the right things, and so we need to see our praise echoed in the praise of others. So the other thing that stabilizes our desires, praise does it, like if they praise the same thing. What does it even more is envy. So if our close friend approves of our choice, like if they say that was a good decision, then you're like, good, that stabilized my resolve. That helps stabilize our desire. But if they start to want it as well, that's even better. That will increase. Now we're talking, okay? And this is where we get into a trap, because pride and envy are two sides of the same coin and they feed on each other, okay? They're brothers. Pride is what self-centeredness looks like when it's in the dominant position, and envy is what self-centeredness looks like when it's in the inferior position, okay? And they feed on each other. So proud people feed on the envy of others, and envious people feed on the pride of others. It makes them stew in their envy, and the proud stew in their pride because they see their glory reflected in other people. And social media is actually like an amplifier for this sort of thing. Like it's a mimetic desire amplification machine. All of your pictures, all of your posts, all of your shares, all of your likes are calibrated often to awaken envy in other people. You are trying to cultivate FOMO in others, fear of missing out, okay? Fear of missing out. You want other people to look at what you've done, and you want them to go, man, I wish I could have done that. I wish I could have been there. I wish I could have seen that. And you're portraying it because, and the likes, and if you get the likes, you're like, yes, winning. And if you don't, you're in your room crying. You didn't laugh because it hit too close to home. We watch others watch us. We want to see if they want to be us. And this, not just in social media, but in person. So guys, you will often compete to be the funniest in a group of people. Who's going to tell the best jokes, the best stories? And I'm ripping the veil off of all this stuff, and I'm like going to ruin the rest of your day. Because the next guy who's funny, everybody's going to look at him like, We see what you're doing. It's not going to work. Okay? Guys will compete to be the funniest in a group of friends, and it will be measured in two ways. One, it will be measured by whether the girls are laughing, because the girls' laughter is the status symbol in relation to the other guys. That's the second way. Okay. Ladies, okay, I've been picking on the dudes. Your turn. What's the best outfit? I'm doing this on ball night, so I know it's going to be bad. What is the best outfit? I'm going to tell you what the best outfit is. It needs to be similar enough to everyone else in your friend group. Like, in other words, you don't want to be a freak. That's stabilizing hesitant desire. If you go really outlandish, everybody's going to be like, okay? It needs to be similar enough to what everybody else is wearing, but it needs to be just a little bit better so that you can be the dominant one. It needs to be a little bit more expensive. It needs to be a little bit newer, and you need to have bought it first. Because if she shows up wearing the same thing you are, you will make sure that everybody knows you bought yours on Sunday and she bought hers on Tuesday after she heard about what you did. That's the sweet spot. That's the best outfit, is similar enough to everybody else that you're not a freak, and yet a little bit better than everybody else so that everybody's like, it's you, girl. All right. And we're watching. We're always watching to see if we're successful. Like some of you literally walk into a room and you take a mental Gallup poll to see how you're doing in the crucial 14 to 19 demographic. And you don't even have to ask any questions. You're just wired to pick up on signals. Your happiness will be based on your perceived approval rating. You don't ask anybody. You don't say to anybody, do you like me? Because that would be weird. And it would be insecure, and you know that it wouldn't work. So instead, it would be sad, and you know that, and so instead you're always looking for cues. How did they respond when I said that? How did they act when I did this? How are people responding to me? And you're cueing off of them to see, how am I doing? All right. I don't have a ton more time on this because I do want to give you some time for questions. Let me give you one more example. Sometimes you don't even actually need the third person. Two people can actually play this game on each other. So this is what I call the goddess and the puppy dog, or the hero and the spaniel. Okay? So the goddess and the puppy dog, that's when the girl is the on top and then the dominant position, and then the puppy dog is the boy who follows her around like the guy in the song. And then the other one is when like the hero, he's like the guy and all the girls want him and she's following him around. Okay? And if you read Shakespeare, it's all over it. Okay? If you want to go find this, just go read you some Shakespeare. What's the best way to inflame the desire of a guy who likes you? Play hard to get. What are you doing? What are you doing when you play hard to get? When girls play hard to get, or when guys play hard to get, what are they doing? They're trying to say, they're putting themselves in both the object of desire position and in the model position. You're like, I possess myself. I like myself. In fact, I'm so good that I'm not sure that you're good enough. And what that does to the other person is, I'm going to fight with you over you. I'm going to win you from you. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily a sinful and evil thing. I think in the Bible, actually, we see examples in like the Song of Psalms of a kind of playful, and if you read Paradise Lost, there's some of this showing up even before the fall and the way Milton describes it. It's not necessarily sinful. It's the way God wired the world. But we take it and we're sinful, and so we corrupt it and we manipulate people. This feeds in at an individual level, right? So the more that she is self-possessed, seemingly self-possessed, the more that he likes her, and the more that he likes her, the more that she becomes self-possessed. Or vice versa, it works both ways. Or what about the crowds? You ever know the guy that every girl wants and that every guy wants to be? There's a guy that every girl wants and every guy wants to be. And there's a girl that every guy wants and every girl wants to be. And what you do, and if you're in that position, you are trying to pull everybody into your orbit. Okay? You want all the constellations to orbit around you, and you want all the desires. You want the guys to, if you're a guy, you want the guys to want to be you, and you want the girls to like you. And again, this isn't necessarily like a totally sinful thing. I'm saying it's unavoidable. And so I'm going to give you a minute, and it's already 10:15, so we're not even going to, it's just going to be one of those days. Here's my example of this. Why does Gaston, I'm going to ruin every movie for you now. I just want you to know this. Why does Gaston want Belle? Because she doesn't want anything to do with him. And this is horrible to him because he's the guy that every guy wants to be and that every girl wants. Those other girls who are always like, oh, Gaston, and they're fawning over him. Like, he doesn't even care about that. Why? Because she just popped his mimetic bubble. Belle walking by with her book and ignoring him, it doesn't matter how many guys want to be him and how many girls, how many guys want to be him, how many girls want to date him. It doesn't matter because there's the one who doesn't, and so he's fixated on her. This is amazing. It's textbook. It's textbook, this stuff. All right. Indifference pops the bubble, because then this is why you can have people who go from the heights of self-centeredness and self-adulation, like very full of themselves. They think they're all that. And then when they crash, they go to total self-pity and self-contempt. And some of you may do this on your own, like hopefully at a smaller scale than like the heights to the depths. But you feel really good about yourself when everybody's liking you, and then all of a sudden it takes one person being indifferent, and you just crash. Pride on the one hand, deep, deep, deep insecurity on the other. All of these are related. So that's enough on that. Let me give you one little thing, two little things on what do we do with this, okay? So that, at this point, I am sorely tempted to just stop here and leave you stewing, but I won't because Jesus loves you and I should too. So mimetic desire isn't bad. It's unavoidable. It's going to be a part of your life. The question is whether it will be faithful or not. So twisted desire is the enemy of true community, and it's based on comparison. You're always going around saying, you're taking your cues from others, and when other people succeed, you're saying, that's not fair, why not me? That's called envy. That's not fair, why not me? And so instead, what should you do? Fundamentally, this is my challenge to you. You must be defined by the grace of God. You must be defined. It must be the defining. God's desire for himself, God's love for himself, and his love for you must be the sun at the center of your solar system that regulates the rest of your desires. Otherwise, you will try to cue off other people. This is another way to talk about idolatry. Right? It's just another way to talk about idolatry. By the grace of God, I am what I am. That's Paul, 1 Corinthians 15. By the grace of God, I am what I am. Grace defines me. It makes me who I am. Grace is a person. It's God. God loves you because he loves you. He doesn't love you because you're lovable. You're not. You are lovable because he loves you. You're incredibly valuable because he values you, and he values you and loves you because of what Jesus has done. You're connected to Jesus. God says, this is my beloved son, and so he says the same thing to you. If you don't get that into your bones, you will spend the rest of your life queuing off of other people as the fundamental fountain of your happiness, and you will be miserable. So, God must be the supreme object of your desire. He's the one you want the most, and he must be the supreme model for your desire. You love what he loves. You love your friends because God loves your friends. You love your family because God loves your family. Someday, you love your spouse, your husband, or your wife fundamentally because God does. If that's not the foundation, if you try to go it alone and do it by yourself and let the desires emerge from you, they won't emerge from you because you're not stable enough to sustain desire. The only thing that can sustain godly desire is God himself in your life, in your heart, working. So don't seek approval and validation from other people. Don't crave it. Don't twist your personality into knots to try to win some invisible popularity contest. Don't place your happiness in getting other people to like you or envy you or want to be you, because the people who are most successful at freeing themselves from these mimetic traps, it's really strange, they often end up being the most liked because they're free. They're free. They have a confidence that is not shaken. They know who they are. They know that they're loved and accepted by God, and therefore they don't crave or need your approval, and they are free to love you and to be kind to you and to be a good friend. And then people who don't, it drives them crazy. They become like Cain. It drives them crazy that Abel is so confident in God's acceptance and approval, and therefore they have to tear down the one who is embraced. So it's really strange. The one who thinks it's a competition loses. The one who knows that it's not wins. There's a great line in the movie Count of Monte Cristo. It's when Mercedes is talking to Count Mondego, and she says, "Remember when we were kids and your dad got you that pony and Edmond's dad got him the whistle? You were so mad that he was happier with his whistle than you were with your pony." Okay? It's just down to the core. The person who is content, who is happy because he knows that he is loved by God himself, is free. We have a few minutes for questions. Go. She went up quick. Do it.
How do you suppress being envious?
Gratitude. The opposite. So So here's one temptation when you're envious is to continue to fixate on the other people's blessing, like whatever they got that you wanted, and it's like, so there's a way in which roll with that. Okay, think about what they got and then thank God for it. Thank God that they got it. So what my deal, whenever I see somebody else get the kind of thing that I want, so I'm a professor, they get their books do well. I write books, their books do well. Or they give a sermon, fantastic sermon, right? Or they get an opportunity that I didn't get. My first go-to is I want to say thank you to God that he gave it to them and not to me. Because if you find, and you say, that sounds really hard. It is, it is. If you cultivate that in your heart, it becomes very easy, right? It's easy to those that try it. To those that do it, it can become second nature. And all of a sudden you find you don't look at other people's success as a threat to your happiness, but as an increase of your happiness. Yes, you're their biggest cheerleader. You're their biggest fan. When something goes good for them, you're not stewing like, why not me? That's not fair. Instead, you're saying, thank you, God, that you gave it to them. And then, God, thank you for all the things that you've given to me. Maybe not that thing, but I'm not going to fixate on what I don't have. I'm going to say thank you for what I do have and receive their gift as a blessing to me. That's fundamental. Go. Yeah, you. What are some healthy and unhealthy ways to avoid pride? So you want to get outside of your own head. People who get stuck in their own head, so again, this is where the pride insecurity thing comes in. Oftentimes pride is like a compensation for this deep insecurity. They go hand in glove. And so pride pride is catching you at the moment when everybody is on your team, and insecurity is catching you at the moment when you're not sure that everybody's on your team. And so the only fundamental solution to that is the gospel. It's God has approved you. He's accepted you. You do not need anybody else's approval. And so I've dealt with pride my whole life. That's one of my besetting sins. There's a handful of sins that I've just have always kind of been the thing that I'm going to have to resist. That's one of them. And relativizing all of my blessings and reminding myself, where did I get that? What do you have that you did not receive? And if it was a gift, why do you boast as though it was just yours? That kind of thing. And so if things go well, like this week has gone relatively well, I feel like you guys have been edified. I could be tempted to be proud. Who gave me a mouth? Who gave me a brain? Right? Who opened the Bible so that I could see wonderful things in his law and then turn around and try to help you? Who did that? It wasn't me. It was God. And so the blessing of this moment, when you guys come up to me, and some of you have done this, and you've said, hey, thank you so much for your talk. My thought, I can receive that. And what I do is I say, thank you so much for saying that. And then in my heart, I'm going, God, thank you for this. Thank you, right? It's all him, right? I just get to be a part of it. I just am glad that I'm in the game, but I'm not bent out of shape if I don't get to be the star. I just want to play. And so pride comes when you feel like you have to be the star, or there's a deep fear that you won't be, that you'll be left on the bench. But if you sincerely want to follow Jesus, and you're not in it for yourself, but because you just want to be in the game, God puts those kind of people in the game. Yeah. So you have to discern. So the reality is, if someone comes to you and says, hey, check out my new thing, the problem, if that's a problem, it's first a problem for you, right? Like you should just be like, awesome, those look great. You should just be, that's awesome, and join them in their joy. And there's nothing that needs to be said. Now, if you find that there's a certain kind of friendship, and maybe you've been there, where it feels like there's always that fishing expedition, right? It's a really delicate thing to talk about. And at some point, you're just going to have the courage to sit down and have the conversation. It says, hey, it feels like sometimes you're fishing. And what you're doing there is that's a very delicate, sensitive place because you're unmasking something. I can do it up here. I can describe it in general, and I know that like some of them are landing. You're going, yep. But nobody's exposed. Like nobody in particular here, right? Other than Gabe. Nobody in particular here has been like called out, okay? In person, it's much more difficult. It's much more difficult. And so at that moment, like if it's serious enough that it's causing a rift and you need to address it, you're just gonna sit down and say, hey, I just want you to know, like, you don't have to impress me. Like, I'm your friend, right? Like, you just need to know that I'm your friend. And you also need to know that you drawing attention to that may actually make it worse for a season. But that's where you have to entrust the other person to God. You're not responsible for how they react. You're responsible for what you do. And so before God, you just need to be able to say, God, I feel like I want to say this to them because I want to love them. And so you go to them and you say, hey, I feel like you're always fishing for compliments, and it feels a little bit insecure. And you just need to know, like, I love you, you're my friend, and you don't need to do that with me, okay? Like I'm on your side no matter what. And that may make them more insecure for a season, and it may actually cause the friendship to be a little bit hard for a while. But if God's at the bottom of that and he shores them back up, at some point they will probably come back and say, hey, thank you for that. And you just have to be stable enough yourself to risk it. 2 more questions. Yeah. So, it's something to be mindful of, and this is where wisdom is really important. It's not wrong. It's absolutely, totally, 100% normal, good, and right that if somebody tells a story that's a good story and that reminds you of something that happened to you and you want to bond over it, for you to tell the story. And at the same time, everybody knows the me monster, right? You guys have all seen the Brian Regan deal? Yes, raise your hand if you've seen this. If you have not seen this, you should go see this. And it's just the guy at the party who's always like, somebody tells a story and he's like, that's nothing. Let me tell you what happened to me. And he talks about how he wants to be the guy, one of the 8 people who have walked on the moon. Because whatever story anybody else says, you can just be like, I walked on the moon. What do you got? So there is a way where you're always trying to one up, and you just have to be able to discern in your heart. If I don't say that, and this is a good test, if you find yourself doing that frequently, if it was me, and I was finding myself every time somebody else told a story and it reminded me of something, and I felt like is there a compulsion? I need to tell my story and make sure everybody knows my story. Here's the good test. Just don't. Demonstrate, I could tell, you want to get to the point where you're free. I could tell my story, and it would be fun. It would be another thing for us to talk about. Or I couldn't, and it's no big deal. And if you find that you're able to speak or not speak, what does that mean? It means you're free. You're free. If you find, I have to tell my story because if I don't, they might not know that my story was just as cool as the other story, now you're in the trap. You're trying to keep up. You're trying to reassert your position. And so repent of that and then work on self-control. Last question. Okay, so the question is, sometimes your feelings aren't there. You know I should love God. I know that I should love other people, but I don't feel that right now. And so should I be a hypocrite or not? Right? Okay. You should be a hypocrite. I mean this actually seriously. Here's what you should do. This is C.S. Lewis, straight down the middle. I just wrote Lewis on the Christian life and get into this more detail there, so if you want to go chase it down, here's the brief answer. Lewis says, you know you're supposed to love God, and yet you know the feelings of warm affection are not there. So what should you do? He says you should imagine yourself in your best moments. Imagine that you were the sort of person who right now really did love God with all your heart. Right now. If you were that kind of, you loved God, you were full of God, you were thoroughly gospeled, the grace was in your life and it was powerful and it was moving and you were filled with it. Imagine that version of you. Now, imagine what that version of you would do in the present moment. Got it? Now, whatever the answer is, go do it. Ask for God's help and go do it. And what you'll find is that Lewis calls this good pretending. You're going to pretend to love God so that you come to love God. Because what happens is if you in faith say, God, I don't feel this, but I'm going to do what I know is the right thing and what I know you want me to do. I'm going to do the deeds of love even when the substance is lacking. What you find is that God often brings the rain. And the substance comes and the feelings rise. It's the same reason you can do as people. I know that I don't feel very much warm affection for that person. I don't want to be kind to them. What if I was actually like Jesus? What if I was full of Jesus? How would I treat them? I would treat them very kindly. So I'm going to go treat them very kindly and discover that I actually become more of a kind person, that it becomes more natural. Same thing with gratitude. Same thing with all these. In the absence of the depth, in faith, asking for God's help, make the move in the direction and see what God does. With that, I got the panel tonight, so we'll have some time for more questions. You guys should feel free to ask whatever you want tonight. You got announcements, or what do you want to do?
Snack time.
Snack time. Have a great snack.